Hey everybody, what's up? It's your boy Dave from NewEraSens.com. With me today is our friend Brennan. We have a really special interview for you guys in light of the Edmonton and Ottawa series coming up that's going to start. We have TSN 1260's own Jason Gregor. Gregor, how's it going?
Pretty good, boys. How you doing?
Good, man.
Senators and Nordiques. It's a unique mix. I like it.
I just, I mean, I wish the rivalry could come back, but unfortunately, it's not there. So it's a little easier watching Colorado this year than Ottawa, but still a diehard Sens fan.
Hey, that's all right, man. I would love to see the Nordiques back. That's one of the best jerseys. Hey, if Winnipeg can come back, who knows? Maybe Quebec can too.
It was such a short-lived stint that they had in Quebec too, really, if you look over the time. And a lot of good rivalries. I'm sure everyone there would love to see them come back. They got a new rank too, so who knows? I took this from my dad, so
So really cool thing for me is we've interviewed some pretty big guys, right? It's guys that we don't like associate with or know very well. So for me, this is really cool because I listen to you and Struddy every day on my way home from work.
Oh, nice.
And every day. And I've been listening to Dusty in the mornings every morning on my way to work. You know, I'm part of both crews there. So for me, this is really cool that I get to talk to the guy that I get a lot of my information from every day on my way home in the worst traffic possible on the Yellowhead. So to me, this is awesome. Struddy's a little crazy. We can all admit that.
He's a beauty.
So Brennan, they have this segment. It's called Struds On, okay? And every day, and it is literally him ranting about different stuff every day. And sometimes it's like the weirdest stuff, and sometimes it is the stuff that you're like, man, he's absolutely right. It drives me nuts. So
that sounds like the perfect guy for radio.
Yeah. His chapstick infatuation and addictions is a little much. It's a little much at times, but it's pretty good.
You're not a chapstick enthusiast yourself?
Well, no, he has like an addiction to it. We actually had a doctor come on the show to talk to him about it. It wasn't a real doctor. I had a friend of mine who's a comedian pretend she was a doctor, and it was probably the greatest segment we've ever had. Struds was so rattled because she was just chirping him about it. So it was.
What's his brand of choice? Is he a Burt's Bees guy, or is he?
I don't know. You know what? It's that blue tub one.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, that's you're pretty deep. That's when you're real.
He's got like he's got 2 in his car and 6 at his house, and like it's embarrassing.
Just intervention time.
Yeah.
All right, Brennan, you want to start it off, buddy?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess just touching on the fact that Bell Let's Talk Day just passed yesterday, actually on Thursday, and that we're having you on here. I was kind of wanting to touch base because I saw that there's some pretty cool things on your show yesterday. One of them being that you had really special guest Dr. Grandma come on. So in light of that, I was wondering if we could talk a little bit just about like how much of an inspiration Dr. Grandma or your mom has been in your life, and what kind of things have you taken away from her, and like what kind of what has like her story helped you with in life, and if there's something that you could share with other people based on that, what might it be?
Yeah, well, it's funny. She has a Twitter account, but she doesn't really use it. She started that many years ago, but she's actually pretty good on social media. Pearl Gregor's her name for it. She's written 3 books now. My mom's one of the most well-read, smart people I've ever met in my life. Like we still have our family farm that I grew up on, and I kind of joke that I'm the hired hand. I still run all the cows and everything out there, but so I get to visit with my mom a lot. And in any conversation you have with mom, usually I might have to bring a notepad just because like she knows a lot of stuff about a lot of different things. And so, my mom did, she dealt with depression for a lot of years of her life. She's pretty open about it. She kind of, first time she had real nightmares when she was younger, and then it progressed and kind of got worse. And it turns out that she'd been, sexually abused when she was very young. She was pre-verbal as a toddler, so she couldn't really tell anyone. And then you kind of just hide that away in your subconscious, like a lot of people do. And so for her, I think a lot of that stemmed from it. Your body tries to tell you stuff that you don't know. And she finally figured all that stuff out when she was, I want to say 39 or 40. And that really changed everything for her. And for her, she says it healed her depression. She still deals with other things, but she's not depressed at the level that she was. And, she's not on any sort of drugs or anything like that anymore. And, as she always says, she goes, hey, if drugs have to get you through the day to start, that's a great thing. But eventually, they just mask the problem. You got to find other avenues. And so she did a lot of research for decades on different things. And, she's done her PhD, and, she's really into dream analysis, and that's what she focuses on. So for me, like, I think it's hard for anybody. And I guess I can only speak for myself. Thankfully I've never had depression. My mom has it. My sister's dealt with it a little bit from concussions playing rugby. And I've just learned that you just be empathetic about it, because it's sometimes if you just take it, just like, well, what do you mean, cheer up? And that's such a, it's kind of, it's an ignorant thing to say to anybody. So I've just learned that you be empathetic, you support it. And from my mom, like, she wasn't going to let depression control her life. She worked really hard as a kid. I never knew she had it. Like, looking back, even like her and my dad, they did a good job of kind of hiding that from her kids, I think. And, obviously it never got too bad, but I've just learned that, you can, like, for my mom, she just didn't want to accept that was going to be for her life the whole way. And so she was able to kind of dig deep into her psyche and figured out what had happened to her as a young child. And, then through that, it took a lot of years for her body to kind of release all those negative toxins that go with holding that in, because your body is an amazing thing. And what we have in our subconscious, a lot of times we don't even know until later. And a lot of it comes from real trauma. There are obviously some people, and science proves it, that you might just have, you're not wired properly, unfortunately. And, so they have different things that just you can't really explain per se. But in a lot of cases, it's real severe trauma sets people down that path because they block it away. And our society has kind of taught us to block those things away. And so I've learned with my mom, just, you talk openly to people and encourage them, if you are dealing with depression, to not let it control you. And if you want to try to heal it, there's always different ways to look at it.
I love that, man. I'm really appreciate you being so open and willing to share that, because it's a incredible story. But it's great. Your mom's definitely an inspiration to everyone that has their own battles and a lot of things. And I think there's a lot of really cool tools that you mentioned there that could really help people that are hurting, because I don't know that everyone really looks at it the same way. I think that a lot of these talks are getting a lot better, and people are really realizing that this is something that needs to be spoken about. It's not something that we need to block out and tuck away and hide it in the back of our minds. But just the whole concept of what else is in your psyche and your subconscious that might not be aware of. I think that's something that maybe some people can realize, like, there's not something wrong with me in terms of like personality. There's something wrong with me because of something that happened or something that in the way that I'm set up. So really, really cool.
We're having such a good convo about mental health, and I put out my own story on Twitter yesterday, which got quite a bit of love. But let's jump into hockey, get into something a little more lighter.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is former Ottawa Senators Kyle Turris. It seems like he left his game back in Ottawa. He hasn't really been able to get back to the player he was when he played for Ottawa, even in Nashville. And honestly, when I heard Edmonton had signed Turris, I was really excited, because I honestly thought a new start for Kyle Turris. He was a fan favorite in Ottawa for all the years he was here. He was big in our community. Now he's starting to get going a little bit more, but I'm thinking put him on the wing instead of as a centerman, as a veteran winger, bump him up a line with a guy like Dry. What do you think? What do you think of Kyle Turris' game? What do you think you can do to maybe use him or utilize him as a veteran?
Well, you know what? They started out, and James Neal wasn't healthy to start the season, and Cassian was on the top line, and Puljujarvi was there, and Puljujarvi hasn't been in the league a long time, and that line had some tough games, no question about it. Kyle Turris, if you just look at his goals for against, it's not good 5-on-5, but early numbers can really skew things. You have one or two bad games, and things can really kind of go downhill. Like they kind of got crushed against Montreal, and some of those goals against that Turris has been on the ice for, he's had no impact on those goals against. Like, the Oilers unfortunately have really gifted goals against this year. That's their biggest problem. They'll play really well for long stretches, and then they just give up easy goals. The last 2 games since Neil Turris and Kassian have been aligned together in Winnipeg, they probably could have had 3 or 4 goals. Neil missed an open net. Kassian missed some great chances, and then their second game against Toronto, Kassian scored. So they're at least showing some positive signs to go there for him. I think when Gaetan Haas returns, there's a chance maybe he's the only other centerman they have who could play in the third line spot, maybe. So Turris is there now, I think, out of necessity. If they want to move him to the wing, maybe that's something that happens in the future. But, it's only been 9 games. In the first 7, he wasn't off to a great start. I don't think anyone could debate that. The last 2, he's been better. So I think Dave Tippett knows him. He's been patient. And you're right. Like, funny thing about Nashville, like how many guys offense goes to Nashville and dies? Like, I don't understand it. Like, they've had a lot of good players that went there and just couldn't find it. They develop and produce great defensemen and goaltenders, but not so much high offense, even decent offensive guys. So, I wonder how much confidence has to do with it a little bit. Like, he did score a great goal against Winnipeg. So, maybe that gets his juices going. But that line, like James Neal had 6 shots and Kassian scored, like they were better. So I think you'll see a little bit more patience, but talk to me in maybe a week or 2, kind of after they have those games against the Senators, because sadly right now for Sens fans, they're like Vancouver was terrible. They played Ottawa 3 in a row, and now they look like Stanley Cup champs because they outscored them 16-3, right? Even though they gave up a lot of shots, but so the Sens could be the tonic for a lot of teams and players to regain their confidence.
We're the little brother for everyone to beat up right now.
Yeah.
That's great. I like that point about Nashville. It is kind of crazy. We're seeing that a bit with Matt Duchene. It looks like he's doing a bit better now, but yeah. And then even like Kevin Fiala, when he came out of there last year, kind of on a tear. And I thought they lost that trade 100%, and Granlund didn't look too great. So it's an interesting point. I guess my question for you as an Edmonton fan, you hear a lot of people, a lot of hockey fans around the league who are going on are like, oh, like how many more years are they going to waste McDavid's talented prime, or how many years is this going to go on? And I guess my question for you is, when you look at McDavid and Draisaitl, you have 2 of the best, like 2 of the top 10, if not 2 of the top 5 forwards in the NHL on the same team. Best player, in my opinion, in McDavid. And what do you think Edmonton needs, or like, what do you think is missing that they haven't been able to push it to the next level where they're true contenders, going on a deep run, or even stringing together consistent years where they're making the playoffs? Like, what do you think is missing? Do you think it's a mindset thing? Is it like, do the players need to start playing a different way? Kind of like how Ovi started back-checking more? Like, what do you think it is?
Well, goals against, man. It's been a trend for a long time. And I know we're in an era of everybody wants everything fast. You're wearing a Nordiques too. Go look at Joe Sakic's first 6 years in the NHL. 7. They were terrible, right? The Nordiques sucked. And Joe Sakic's become a Hall of Famer, right? But like, they were beyond bad. Mario Lemieux only made the playoffs once in his first 6 years. And those were in when there was 21 teams in the league, not 30. Right? Like, it was easier to make playoffs and they still couldn't do it. So like the Oilers were such a tire fire. And even when McDavid came in, you look at Peter Chiarelli. So you draft McDavid, and then at the same draft, you trade the 16th pick and the 32nd pick or 3rd or whatever the pick was that year for Griffin freaking Reinhart.
Oh, yeah.
Who was at the time not even a top pair guy in the American League. He was a second pair guy in the American League. Like that, they could have taken Kyle Connor. They could have taken Thomas Chabot. You could have taken Matt Barzal. Now, they probably wouldn't have taken Barzal because they had a lot of centers. So I get it. But you could have taken Kyle Connor. You could have taken Chabot, right? You could go down the list. You could have taken you could have taken Brock Besser, any of those guys in the next 8 picks. Pick any of them. Eriksson Ek would have been a better pick. So that's connecting. That screwed him over. Then you throw in the Taylor Hall trade, right? Then you throw in the Eberle trade. So get rid of bad management would be the first step. And so they did. They brought in Ken Holland. It's only his 2nd year. And like, the Oilers were a playoff team. Like, they soiled the sheets in the bubble. It was embarrassing how bad they played against Chicago. And so I think, recency bias, or just that's what we see recent. And I get it. And I understand why Oiler fans are upset. They're sick of it. Like, they have seen more losing than any fan base for 2 decades. 2 decades, man. Like, they suck. So I get why they're frustrated, but ruining the years of McDavid. Like you mentioned, Ovi. Oh yeah, how many times did Ovi get to the 3rd round in his career until he won the cup? Oh, how about 0? Right. Yeah. So I think we get on narratives too quickly, and to look at it. There's just because Crosby won right away. Gretzky won soon. Lemieux won in year 7. Awesome. Lindros never won. Right. Steve Yzerman was going to get traded how many times before he won? Right, to Ottawa. So no one wins one way. And now with 30 teams, like, there's going to be a lot of superstars that never win, right? Like, obviously you hope McDavid wins. He's got another 15 years of his career. So I think he'll have a chance to get better. But it comes down to the Oilers' defensive play. And, this year they bungled their goaltending situation. So you bring in Forsberg, okay, and then you expose him to protect William Lagesson. How many of your Sens fans are like, who? Right? That is exactly it. William Lagesson, who's played 1 game for the Oilers. And when I asked Ken Holland why he didn't want a 3rd goal, and this is not hindsight 2020, I said this on my show the Friday before the waiver wire was starting. I said, this is the year to protect 3 goalies. Because, I thought Toronto would do it, and they did for a brief time. Because the taxi squad, you have all your extra guys. You just bring them up and down. Once they clear waivers, it doesn't matter. And so they're like, well, we don't want to have a guy in the roster who doesn't play. Yeah, but that's what William Lagesson's doing. He's sitting on your roster and he's played 1 game. And so they didn't protect Forsberg. He got claimed. They could have then claimed Nedeljkovic from Carolina the next day if they wanted to, and then just traded the 2 of them, because you can trade a guy within 30 days as long as you offer him to any of the other teams who put in a claim. Well, no one put in a claim on Nedeljkovic because he cleared. We know that. And no one else after Carolina would have claimed Forsberg. So you could have made that deal and protected yourself. And so, like, some of the decisions on the ice, like now Koskinen's getting run into the ground. He's a good goalie as long as he doesn't have to play 9 games in 16 days. He's not that good, right? Yeah. So I look at the Oilers, and when they reduce their goals against, their team will be fine. But and right now, they've just been gifting teams goals. Like, you can't give up an easy goal every game and expect to win.
Yeah, that was the whole thing. Like, I think it was, I can't remember where I heard it on. I think it was Bieksa said, he's like, if these guys don't get 2 points each every night, they're not going to win the game. Like, McDavid at this point, like McDavid and Draisaitl both need to get at least 2 points in order for the Oilers to win, which, I mean, they do on a lot of nights. Yeah. but I thought that was interesting because, yeah. And like, personally, I like their decor. So I was curious to see what you would
their decor, but it's everybody. This year, like, Adam Larsson should be their most reliable defensive player, and he got off to a horrible start. Like, the first game, he just makes 2 terrible reads, vacates the middle of the ice, and Bo Horvat's got a breakaway. Like, what are you doing? Like that? I get that you had no preseason, but still, you're like, these aren't guys who are in their first years, right? Like, and if you don't have good defense, and I think Ottawa can attest to that right now, if you don't have good defense, I don't care how good potentially your offensive guys are. You're going to get murdered when you got to play in your own zone all the time. And so I look at the Oilers. Their defense core is okay, but
you need Clefbaum back.
He would help, sure, but to me, he would help. There's no question about that. Like, I'll say that for sure. But if your team can't be good because you lose a defenseman, like, look at Boston. Pasternak's out. Chara's gone. Krug's gone. They've only got basically 5 forward scoring. They're still winning. You know why? Because they don't give up any goals. And so you've got to learn how to play team defense better in Edmonton. And that comes a commitment from the players to buy in. And that the coach can talk all he wants. He can come up with the greatest system ever. If the players aren't willing to do it, and that's the thing. This year, look at Draisaitl. Draisaitl, I think, is now 9-2 goals, 4 goals against, 5-on-5. So you can't tell me that he's not playing good defensively, right? And the other guys should follow. So it's just a matter of when they've made mistakes this year, like last game, Mikko Koskinen behind the net, turns it over, they score. That's not anybody else other than a bad play by Koskinen. Then Kyler Yamamoto, who's been actually pretty good this year, it's 3-3, he's on the boards, tons of time, shorthanded, doesn't get it out. 2 seconds later, Matthews wide open, goal. Cost you the game. So there's 2 goals you gifted. Larsson, they had another game, he gifts 2 goals. That has been killing this team. So they'll go long stretches of 5-on-5. Like, they've actually outshot Toronto 5-on-5 in every game they played this year. Every game. Right? And look at Toronto. Edmonton actually has as many 5-on-5 goals as Toronto. So no one talks about Marner and Matthews having to score all these points, because the difference is Edmonton gives – it's not that their supporting cast is crushing it. It needs to be better. But it's Edmonton's goals against. Until they change that, they're not winning.
So one of the things that I've seen a lot of social media, and I don't know if this is something you've seen. Like Ottawa's got a lot of goalies. Like right now, we have our own goalie issues to start the year, but down the system, Ottawa's got quite a few goalies sitting there. Like, have you heard anything about maybe the potential of like an Oilers Ottawa trade going to dig in for one of these young goalies and kind of, it might not be the ideal season or ideal situation to get a young goalie and go trade for it, but at the end of the day,
if you're the now, did any of these young goalies have like more than one season of AHL experience? Because when we look at look at Matt Murray in Ottawa. Matt Murray still played 2 years in the AHL. He had a .931 and a .941 save percentage before he got called up, right? So he proved it there. Jordan Binnington was in the AHL for 5 years because everyone's like, well, what about Binnington? I'm like, yeah, what about him? He cleared waivers 3 different years. He was in the minors. It wasn't very good. And then his last 2 years in the minors, he had .926 and .927 save percentage. So at least he showed numbers. He comes up, he has a great defense in front of him, and he's pretty good. So, the guys – now I've covered the Oilers for so many years, and I've seen the hope. Like at the start of the year, everybody was like, "Oh, Ottawa's going to be better," and I was like, "What?" Like I don't want to be rude, but I'm like, "Okay." So they brought in Derek Stepan. He's a downgrade from Pajot, right? Like who was these really? Like I would say, okay, Dadonoff's an upgrade. Okay, I'll give you that. But when you start the season with 3 rookies in your top 6, like I'm sorry, dude. Like I've seen that movie in Edmonton. It doesn't end well. It's a horror movie, and that's kind of like what Ottawa is going to go through. And I feel bad for Sens fans because you get fed this hope like, oh yeah, Norris is going to help us, and Stutzle, they're going to help you probably when they're 21 or 22. Like even Leon Draisaitl. Leon Draisaitl wasn't in the NHL at 18 because he had a late birthday. He was in the WHL. Then at 19, he played 37 games, had 2 goals, wasn't NHL ready. Went back, was an MVP at the Memorial Cup. Then he comes in at 20, and he's a different player. Right? Connor McDavid, like look at Jack Hughes. He was the #1 overall pick. He shouldn't even be in the league last year. He wasn't ready. So like Stutzle, I really question why you would play him this year. I don't think it like getting your ass handed to you all the time. Like sure he might learn from it, so maybe, but sometimes it's better to go develop in a lower league and maintain your confidence. This whole ideology that, oh, you got to challenge yourself against the best. Oh, really? And then lose your confidence? Name me a player who didn't benefit from dominating at a lower level over a guy who had to come in and get his teeth kicked in just so he could gain experience. Like there's more guys that are better from dominating and coming into the NHL with confidence than there is guys who have to get their teeth kicked in for a few years.
I honestly, I think the reason why the Ottawa Senators brought Stutzle right away, I think it was more of for the ownership saving face, right? Oh, yeah. He's trying to gain the fans over again. He's trying to sell the jerseys and hey guys, look at me. This is what I'm doing for you guys. Look, yeah, we got this superstar, 3rd overall pick. So that's what I think it was. Honestly, if it was for any other reason, I think he'd be still playing at Mannheim right now.
And see, but that to me is like I've seen bad and bad leadership starts at the top and then comes down. And
we have a terrible ownership. We do.
To be devil's advocate here, though, at the same time, like when you look at like UND and the amount of players that Ottawa like is developing, Shane Pinto, JBD. I mean, well, obviously Sanderson wasn't coming in this year, but like I do think like at certain times they haven't been rushing all their players. Where
I'm just using Stutzle as an example of if he was the basis to help a team win, like name one competitive team in the NHL who has 3 rookies in their top 6. None. Like it just doesn't happen, right? Even when they're great, like Evgeny Malkin, Ovechkin, they didn't come to the NHL till they were 20. Like Malkin was 2 years after his draft, and he was the 2nd overall pick.
Well, it's funny you said that about the goalies as well, because like Shesterkin, for instance, like this year, obviously he didn't get off to the best start, but he was coming in and everyone's like, oh, this kid. He's 25 years old.
Yes.
Like you said about Binnington. I remember watching him on sound when I going to OHL games, and I was like, this guy's a stud. He's going to be unreal in the NHL. I'm like, just waiting years for him. He was a stud, but it took him a bit. Yeah. Like, and it's true. Like goalies, especially like Matt Murray and Shesterkin are only a year off in age, which blows my mind. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think Stuart Skinner might be your answer there in a few years, depending
Well,
on.
yeah, well, that's what they hope. Like the Oilers haven't drafted a goalie since Devin Dubnyk in 2004, who's come in and played of any sort of games. And you look at teams who win. What's the one consistent they've had? Look at the goal. Well, outside of Boston, although Tuukka Rask got traded right away, he's kind of developed in their organization, right? Corey Crawford developed in Chicago. Vasilevsky developed in Tampa. Binnington's developed in St. Louis, late developer, but he was still developed there. Fleury and Murray, both from Pittsburgh. Holtby's been in Washington forever. Like it's, I look at Edmonton and they've got Konovalov, they've got Rodrigue, and they've got Skinner. And they got to hope that in a few years, one of those three guys can play. Now, Stuart Skinner's only played 41 AHL games. He had an .892 save percentage. Is he? I'm not sure. Like they got to play a goalie at some point here, and it might be Grosnick, the veteran AHL guy who's got 2 NHL games. Because at least he was goalie of the year in the AHL. He's had a lot of .920 save percentage seasons there. Like maybe he can be a guy. Like he might play Sunday against Ottawa. Like I think, I just can't see them continuing to run Koskinen unless they lose to Toronto. Then they might have to play him because they're like, God, we can't lose to Ottawa with a backup goalie. So it's amazing the situation Edmonton's put themselves in, and they have no one else but themselves to blame for it because they didn't need to be here.
Yeah, no, definitely. It makes it tough, especially when you see like Calgary bringing in Markstrom and stuff like that. And
Edmonton tried, but they didn't. Edmonton made offers, but he chose Calgary. So I'll give them effort there for trying. But after that, like even Smith and Forsberg was fine, but the Forsberg waivers, they just screwed themselves.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It's tough, especially when it's an area of need.
I wanted to ask you if Brady Tkachuk plays in the West, do you still think Matthew Tkachuk is the most hated Tkachuk in Edmonton?
Oh, it's a good question. I don't know if Brady's is. I don't know if he's as cheap as his brother. And here's the thing. I want to make this abundantly clear. And I said this on my show last year. I was like, thank you, Matthew Tkachuk. Thank you. Because the Battle of Alberta got reinvigorated. Like he brought some life to it. Like I was in Maui last year at this time. And my mother and my mother-in-law were the ones who like that return game on January 29th. I'm on a beach. And when I go on holidays, I try not to worry about sports. And they're like, hey, do you think we can get the game? And I'm like, what game? Well, Edmonton, Calgary. And I'm like, these are my 70-year-old mother and mother-in-law. They were so fired up because everyone's like, what's going to happen? Like, I'm like, that's how it used to be in the 80s. And, the Nordiques and the Habs and the Leafs and the Senators in the early 2000s, like that was a great rivalry. So, if he was out here, it would be hard pressed to be more of a jerk. And I say that like it's good to have villains, right? And so you know what? He's like I think if Brody had more skill around him, I think he might be more skilled than Matthew a little bit. Like he's bigger, he's stronger. I think he's probably tougher. But Matt right now is just a better shit disturber, right? Like just the little things he does, like just irritates people. And like he's a great villain because other fan bases can't stand him. And that's good for the game. We need more of that. So like I hope that Tkachuk comes into Edmonton and spears someone or cross-checks someone and there's got some animosity because the game needs more of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, we were talking to Darcy Tucker just a few weeks ago, and one of the things he was saying was how he loves the Battle of Alberta now, right? And hockey a lot is a lot of setups nowadays, right? It's stage fighting, and he's not a fan of that. And really hoping that Brady Tkachuk doesn't care how close Austin Matthews is with the Tkachuk family, because everyone knows they're really close. But he doesn't give a crap, and he's just going to go at it with everybody and run Austin Matthews. That was kind of the hope we had, but in the first couple of games, we didn't say any of that. And we were really hoping that right out of the gates, that rivalry was going to come back and be like, hey, we're playing each other 9 times. Let's start this right now. But we didn't get that. With Calgary and Edmonton, I love it because I go to Calgary and Edmonton games. I go to an Edmonton game. Doesn't matter who they're playing. There's still always going to be somebody wearing the Matthew Tkachuk turtling T-shirt, or there's the guy who's dressed in an entire turtle suit in the middle of the floor at Rogers Arena, just turtled up, and you always see it. And that's what we need. That's the rivalries where it's fun.
Oh, I'm with you, man. Like I hope it happens, and I think rivalries, they start in the regular season for sure, and they're also better when both teams are competitive, right? So as Ottawa, and I like a lot of their pieces. I didn't. you still need to have good veterans, like not just good person, that helps to have good people, but you need to have veterans who can play. And that's something that they're going to have to look like. I would have overpaid Pajot a little bit just because I know he's a good player. And, you know, you overpay him because Senators weren't going to compete for the next 2 or 3 years, realistically. But if he helps them get better by the final few years of his contract, you can still live with it if he's $1 million overpaid, because the value to allow the other guys, you know, the Bathersons and Norris and all those other guys to be better, that will help you down the road. And that's the mistake Edmonton made. Was Edmonton, when they had all their years of bad and they had Hall and Eberle and, you know, Payarvi and then Yakupov, well, they got rid of what I called their second tier guys. They had older guys like Horkoff and Smith, but they had Stoll and Torres and Matt Green, who were good character. They weren't great players, but good character guys. And look at Green and Stoll. They were huge parts of those teams in LA for what they brought in the room and competitiveness on the ice. And plus, you know, they were kind of the go-between age group to have a connect with your 18 and 20 and 21-year-old guys. And Edmonton really screwed that up. And now Draisaitl and McDavid are kind of the middle-aged guys, you know, 24 years of age with a lot of experience. So that's like when I watch Ottawa now, and that's why at the start of the year I was like, I really saw like everyone's coming on my show and they're like, Gregor, what are you talking about? Like, Ottawa's way more improved. And I'm like, I'm really sorry, guys. Like, I don't see them winning 15 games. Like, I hate to say that, but they're just, the moves they made were just across the board even. One guy in, one guy out, and I'm not sure it was a big enough improvement because they got rid of, like, I get why Borowiecki, he was probably like, I got to get rid of the owner. Like, after that Between Two Ferns like interview that he had to do, like, my God. But so I think that hurt them a little bit.
Well, we had him on the show. He actually said that was a very uncomfortable and forced interview.
Oh,
we talked to him after he was traded to Nashville, and he goes, "That was the most awkward thing ever."
Oh, like everybody could see that, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, what? You might as well sit down and have to go on FaceTime with your ex and be like, "Hey, so how are you doing?" Like, come on, it's brutal.
Brandon, you got the last question teed up?
Oh, I didn't know if we were running out of time with Greg's here. Here, I'll ask you this: Sorry. So going back on the famous 1-for-1 that Oilers fans love getting roasted on, we'll go with this. In hindsight, now, how do you feel about that trade? And do you think that Edmonton could keep Taylor Hall with all the other players that they have if they were to hold on to him?
100%. Like, the day that trade was made, I was on my show and I was just ripping. I don't know if I'd ever been like, I was just like, what a joke. That was such a terrible trade. Like,
I was listening to you that day.
Awful trade. And people were like, oh no. Because people, like, eventually what happens is you're so desperate for hope that you'll find somebody to blame, right? They would come up with these ludicrous reasons of, oh yeah, you know, like, people forget Connor McDavid lived with Taylor Hall the first year. Right? Taylor Hall would actually go to the bar because he was kind of done going to the bar. He would go to the bar, pick up McDavid to ensure nothing happened. Right? But that doesn't get, they're like, oh, and they're like, well, Hall and McDavid didn't have success. They played 2 games together. But the best part was Hall could drive a line with Draisaitl. McDavid could have another line. And yeah, that was, and it's not that, you know, like, Adam Larsson at least was an NHL player. Right? He's still an NHL player. The Griffin Reinhart trade was the worst because they got nothing. We had 2 high picks that would have turned out to be something. Definitely one of them would have been really good. But that Hall trade, easily you could have kept him because he was a $6 million player. He was a $6 million player when he won the Hart Trophy, right? Like that up until this year, you wouldn't have had to re-sign him. And you just think if the Oilers just would have done that summer, they wouldn't have acquired Milan Lucic, right?
Yeah.
You could have kept Hall and signed Jason Demers, and it would have cost you basically the exact same money that you had Lucic and Larsson for. Like, it's not even close how much better the Oilers would have been long term with that. And like, Eberle was one that you probably would have had to lose just because Eberle's not as good as Nugent Hopkins and Hall in different position at the time than Nugent Hopkins. But it's mind-blowing how bad that trade was this many years ago. And what's even more mind-blowing is how some people will actually think that it was a good trade for the Oilers. Like, some wonder, oh yeah, but they made the playoffs in 2017. I'm like, yeah, that's 1 year, right? So you think if Hall was there, they wouldn't have made the playoffs? Like, give me a break.
It's funny. I'm happy that you said that because when I was watching Draisaitl come up, like that first full year that he had in Edmonton, when he was on that line with Hall, I was like, holy, like the 2 of them together were incredible.
And Draisaitl talked about it. He's like Taylor Hall carried that line. He was the driver of that line at the time, which allowed Draisaitl to just come in and develop. So imagine if they would have kept that going, right? Like imagine what would have happened. You would have had now Draisaitl McDavid would still be dominant on the power play, and maybe they played Draisaitl Hall and McDavid the odd shift here or there late in the game. Great, but you would have had two really dominant lines, right? And Nugent Hopkins might have been the one eventually that got traded because you didn't need him as a third line center, right? So you either move him to the wing, which is fine too, and you could have done that. So like it's such like the most. If I was an Oiler fan, the thing that would piss me off the most is how they ruined after all the years of suck in a span of 12 months. They ruined what could have been a great team because of just dumb trades. And like, so when you trade Eberle for Strome, and then they traded Ryan Strome when he was actually playing really well as a center iceman, the third center iceman they needed, he never would have put up the numbers. So in Edmonton, in New York, because he wouldn't have played in the top six because you had Draisaitl and McDavid, which is fine. But they traded him after 18 games because their line had one goal, even though they were killing everybody in shot attempts. They couldn't score in the ocean. Like you would have given them $100 in a brothel, they weren't scoring. But all of a sudden, because things, any outlier, positive or negative, eventually comes back to the middle, right? And so they traded him for Spooner. Like what the? And then even the Drake Kajula trade for Brandon Manning. Like, are you kidding me? Like it was embarrassing.
And he was the one that hit had that like intentionally.
McDavid,
yeah. Like it was the trades that Chiarelli made. Like, hey, he made some good ones. The Cassian for Scriven's good trade for them. The Maroon trade was a great trade for them. But the big trades that crushed them were just Griffin Reinhart, Taylor Hall, Jordan Eberle, Ryan Strome. Like it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And now they're kind of rebuilding from that again, which is embarrassing.
I just can't believe that they didn't fire him a long time ago. Honestly, you talk to Oiler fans and you're like, okay, the shoe's going to drop. No, okay, the shoe didn't drop. Okay, now the shoe's going to drop. That was really stupid, Chiarelli. You're going to get fired today. Nope, you didn't get fired today.
If it makes you feel any better, at least you didn't have Cody Ceci instead of Adam Larsson, because apparently that trade was in the works before. But no, $6 million.
Out of this. I never put by anything on Chiarelli at that point. So, and then some people think he should be up for the job in Pittsburgh. Like, are you serious? Like, you know what? Hey, he obviously had great success in Boston. I give him credit for that. He built Boston's blue line. There's no one can argue that. He did a really good job of building that team. But since 2013, he's been a tire fire as a GM. You can't argue it. The Sagan trade in Boston, the Hall trades, the Reinhart trades. If you want to keep him as a scout, great. But if he's running your organization, you're going nowhere.
They give it enough. And Sagan, I think, like in his tenure. So I do wonder too sometimes, but they won the cup and they've been competitive. So,
well, Gregor, honestly, you've been on longer than I thought you would be, and you've been amusing. You've been informative. You've been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us, man. Honestly, it's been a lot of fun. The stories are always great. I love that you censored yourself without dropping an F-bomb, but you didn't censor what you had to say. So I appreciate that. And to our viewers, don't forget to like this video and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And again, Gregor, appreciate your time, man. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, guys. Have a good one. Enjoy the games.
Thanks, you too. Thanks for coming
as well.